Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another evening of learning Islam with Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento. I am Haazim Rashed, the resident Imam of Masjid As-Sabur, and with me is Imam Omar Shareef. Not like in the movies, but it is Omar Shareef.
Assalamu alaikum, brother man.
Now, this brother is the former Imam of Masjid As-Sabur and a long-time activist in the Muslim community. And tonight we're going to be discussing some aspects of Ramadan, but more especially Eid, the recurring happiness that is at the end of the month of Ramadan and also during the Hajj or pilgrimage. So, as always, before we begin Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, with the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. I openly bear witness there is no God but the one God. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. And I openly bear witness that Muhammad is his slave, servant, and apostle. Again, Brother Imam, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother man. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me on the program. I'm on it.
Now, I got to ask you a question. What number of years have you done Ramadan this year?
Okay, well, my first Ramadan was in 1975, I would say.
1975. So this is your 38th Ramadan.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes.
And it gets better every year.
Better every year. That's right. You find more and more that enhances your life as you go through it every year.
Oh, good. Now, when you first started during Ramadan, was it done according to the lunar calendar?
Always, Ramadan is done in the the Islamic calendar is the lunar calendar as opposed to the solar calendar, which is the Western or the Western calendar. And Ramadan falls in the ninth month of the lunar calendar, and so it comes every year. And because there's a difference in terms of the lunar and the solar calendar, it moves every year forward. So in a cycle, you can go through the whole cycle from summer to winter and all the seasons as you go through each Ramadan each year. So it creates really a balance that you don't have to do at the same time every year. Back in the days before we were of the what we might call Orthodox Islam, I hate to use that term, but during the time of the Nation of Islam, we practiced Ramadan strictly in December, and there was a good reason for that, because that was one of the shortest months of the year, and because we were not adept as a people to fasting, it made it a little easier to introduce us into the concept of fasting. So by the time 1975 came around, when Imam Muhammad took leadership of our community and he began to orientate us toward the faith of Islam as it should be practiced, and we began to practice Ramadan in its traditional sense. As a matter of fact, that particular year, it came during the hottest, the heat of the peak of the summer, when the longest days of the summer. So our first introduction to Islam, to Ramadan, was the longest day. We would start 4:30 in the morning and wouldn't break fast till about 9 o'clock that night. So it was quite interesting to bite your teeth, so to speak, on Ramadan at that particular time. But it prepared us because after going through it that year, the rest of it was a breeze.
Well, I think we're going to be in a little bit of a comparable situation right now this year.
Absolutely.
Because Ramadan will be starting in the first full week of July and going until the first full week of August.
Yes. Yes. Well, you know, this will be actually the second cycle, I think, for us in terms of since we began Ramadan. I think we've gone through a whole cycle of the long summer and then back to the winter and so forth. And I think this will be, do you know how many years it takes to go through that complete cycle?
I think it's about 30 years.
About 30 years.
Yeah, because the way that the difference in the calendars work, the solar calendar, the lunar calendar is about 12 days shorter than the solar calendar. So, for example, last year when we started Ramadan, it was like the 20th or 21st of July, and this year it's going to be the 8th or 9th. And so it just keeps moving like that. So in about, let's say 14 years, it'll be December again.
Yeah, okay. So this is our second cycle. Yeah.
But that's wonderful. Now, I did want to cite the Quranic verses that talk about the fast, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the fast, but I want to get into the idea of the Eid.
Yes.
Because that's going to be coming up at the end of the fast, which will be in the first week of August.
Yes. Okay.
Now we're going to be reading from Surah 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayats 183 through 185. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge with Allah from the rejected enemy. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. O you who have attained to faith, fasting is ordained for you, as it was ordained for those before you, so you might remain conscious of God. Fasting during a certain number of days, but whoever of you is ill or on a journey shall fast instead for the same number of days of other days. And in such cases it is incumbent upon those who can afford to make sacrifice by feeding a needy person. And whoever does more good than he is bound to do does good unto himself thereby, for to fast is to do good unto yourselves, if you but knew it. It was the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was first bestowed from on high as a guidance unto man and a self-evident proof of that guidance, and as the standard by which to discern the true from the false. Hence, whoever of you lives to see this month shall fast throughout it, but he that is ill or on a journey shall fast instead for the same number of other days. God wills that you shall have ease, and does not will you to suffer hardship, but he desires that you complete the number of days required, and that you extol God for his having guided you aright, and that you render your thanks unto him. May God bless the reading of his word. Now let's talk about it for just a moment. This is an ordinance, a rule that God has given us, that we fast. So during Ramadan, we fast for 28, 29, or 30 days.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yes.
I know for people. Now let's describe the fast for a second.
Well, the Ramadan fast is a fast that we start at dawn, and we fast throughout the day, the daylight hours, until sunset. And when the sun sets, that's the signal for us to that we can eat.
Now, what is the dawn defined as?
The dawn is, as the Quran defines, as that thin thread that cuts across the horizon, and it's before sunset. I mean, it's before sunrise, and it's right at the crack of dawn, when the dark and the light the daylight just begins to crack along the horizon. That's what's called that thin white thread.
Yes, I remember there is a tradition about that, where someone had tied a white thread
Right.
and a black thread to the bed,
Right.
and they were going to tell when they could stop eating by when they could tell the white thread from the black thread. And then the prophet said, no, that's not what we mean. He means that white thread along the horizon,
Yes.
which signals the first light of the sun crossing the horizon.
That's right. Yes. Alhamdulillah. Well, you know, there had been some confusion about when actually the fast begins, and I think that needs to really be spoken to, because some people are under misconception that the fast begins at sunrise, or the fasting day begins at sunrise, and that's not accurate. And it begins at that crack of dawn, at that particular point of the horizon when the daylight cracks the night sky.
And also the Ramadan day actually begins at Maghrib, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, that at the first prayer, I mean, when the first day of Ramadan, I should say, begins that night at the sighting of the moon.
Right.
Traditionally, it was the sighting of the moon. And we know we live in an environment today in the world where that's not always possible to be able to reconcile whether the moon is there or not. So now a lot of people begin to depend on the scientific methods of trying to discern whether or not there's a new moon or not.
Mm-hmm.
We know that first new moon is impossible to see. They call it the black moon.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it. But then as the next day progress, usually it's there. So we depend now more on the scientific calculation to determine at what exact day the Ramadan starts. But that being said, there's something also to be said about being able to go out and actually sight it with your naked eye. In fact, that has been our tradition for a long time, to see if we can actually see it. The tradition is that as long as someone reliable says that they saw the crescent moon, the new moon, that is sufficient to begin the fast.
Yes.
We don't question the person whether did you actually see it. I'm not sure if you saw that or not. No, you don't do that. If the person says they saw it, as long as it's feasible that it could be seen, then we accept that and we go on with the fast. And we call around, and you go from word of mouth and let everyone know that the fast has begun. Ramadan is begun.
And the interesting thing is, the tradition of Prophet Muhammad allowed for the fast to begin at different days in different places.
Yes.
Because there was a local sighting of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, though, we have, tweets and Facebook and everything else, so the word can get out, and we have a lot of believers who will follow a sighting from Saudi Arabia or something in this country when it might not be feasible to see it here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is something that had been a controversy for a long time, but I think it's been settled pretty much, because the Prophet ﷺ, when they talked about the sighting of the fast, you spoke about the person who came and said he saw the sighting coming from another area, and then another one said, well, we didn't see it here. So and there was and the Prophet said, well, both of you are right, you know, and let the fast begin. So we feel the same way about now, because usually Saudi Arabia and places over in the east, they do actually have an opportunity to see it before we do. But we're of that mind that we like to see it here. In fact, it should be that on the continent that you're on is where you should really rely upon starting your fast. It's not a thing of disunity at all. It's a matter of logistics. Where are you at the time? As long as you get your 30 days, 28 or 29 or 30 days in, because the end of the fast is pretty...
we all celebrate pretty much together.
Right, yeah.
Now, I just was, when we talk about the Eid, is there only one Eid?
No, actually there are two Eids in the Muslim Islamic world. we celebrate 2 days of what we call the holidays or festivals, and one is the Eid al-Fitr, which is the one that we celebrate at the end of Ramadan, and the other one is Eid al-Ahad, which is the Eid of during the Hajj, during that particular, the pilgrimage, during that particular time, and that comes during the month of al-Hajj, which is the 12th month. The 12th month in the lunar calendar.
And it's on the 10th day of that month.
Yes.
Now, we had just seen a picture showing all of the Muslims praying during an Eid celebration. You know, because one of the things that's unique about the Muslim celebration, it includes a prayer that is very highly recommended. And it's an interesting prayer because unlike every other prayer, there is no call to prayer or adhan. There is no stand for prayer or iqama, and you just stand up, make your prayers, and then there is a brief lecture afterward.
Well, let's maybe elaborate a little bit on that so the viewing audience can understand what we're talking about. During the traditional method of prayer, or procedure for prayer, is that, for instance, for just your regular prayers, prayer times, there would be an adhan called. Most people in the world are familiar with the adhan. I mean, they've heard it in enough movies to recognize the adhan, which is a very beautiful, and the story of the adhan is a beautiful story in and of itself. That could be a subject for another time, but
it'll have to be.
I know that, but it is a very beautiful story. Excuse me, and that's the call to prayer. That's to alert you that the prayer time is in, and that we should start moving toward the masjid or toward wherever you're going to make your salat, your prayer. And that's traditional. Now, Friday prayer is also a traditional when before what we call the khutbah, which is the sermon or the talk. Before that begins, there's an adhan call when you first come to the masjid, and then just before the imam delivers the khutbah, and that's traditional. It's different with the Eid. With the Eid, as you've already stated, there's no adhan and there's no iqama. The adhan, again, is the call to prayer, the initial call to prayer. The iqama is the alert to tell you it's time now, settle down, quiet down. The imam is about to deliver his khutbah, or it's time to make the salat, whichever the case may be. But in the Eid prayer, there's none of that. No adhan, no iqama. And basically, the imam just says, everyone rise, let's prepare for salat. And we make the 2 rak'ahs. There's, again, another distinction when it comes to the 2 rak'ahs. Ordinarily, there would just be what we call the takbirah, which is, again, an alert.
The Allahu Akbar.
The Allahu Akbar, which is the stating of God is the greatest. That usually occurs every time you change positions. But in this particular case with the Eid, beginning the prayer, the imam does 7 for the first rak'ah. Rak'ah is the cycle or position that you take for each completed cycle of salat.
It's like a unit of prayer.
A unit of prayer, and there's 2 there's a minimum of 2 for each prayer. It can be as many as 4 and so forth. But at the beginning is when the imam does 7 takbirs, where he raises his hand to his ear and declares that God is the greatest, and does that 7 times, and the community follows behind him. After the first completed unit or cycle, then the imam again rises to the position of the standing position, which it'll come back to me in a minute, the Arabic word. And he does 5 additional takbirs. And then we go into the tradition of the regular salat. And then after that is complete, then the imam gets up and delivers the sermon. Now that's reversed for the Jummah prayer, where the sermon is said first and then the prayer is said afterwards. So that's a distinction the difference.
Now, the other thing that's interesting about the Eid al-Fitr is for the Eid al-Adha, you don't eat before the prayer. But for the Eid al-Fitr, you must eat before the prayer.
Yes, the Eid al-Fitr, the Eid al-Fitr is the whole point of that is the breaking of the fast.
Exactly.
So that's why that particular morning, which is the morning of the first day of Sawal, you get up and you do your whatever, and you before you come to the masjid for the prayer, you eat something. Now all month long, you have been fasting.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular morning, this day, the first day of the breaking of the fast, you eat something and then come to the masjid, as opposed to the Adha, is where you don't eat anything, because that particular Eid speaks about sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So you, in this case, you're not eating as a symbol of sacrificing. So, alhamdulillah.
Now, it's interesting to me because, you know, the first time I actually did the fast, I did not realize how complete it was. Because you don't eat anything, drink anything, smoke anything, chew anything, or put a mint in your mouth. It's nothing in there. And even when you rinse your mouth out, you have to be careful not to swallow.
Well, this is interesting, and you mentioned smoking. I hope no Muslims are smoking. I hope you're not smoking. We know smoking is bad for us. It causes cancer. All kinds of things come bad. Okay, we'll go on from there.
Thank you.
Just throwing a commercial in there. But no, you're right. There are things that we abstain from during the month, the daylight hours, and one of them is food and drink. The other is sexual activity with our mate, our wives, and our husbands, or their husbands, and also any kind of acts or activities that will take away from your spiritual self.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about this is it appears that this is really more about disciplining your thoughts than it is about just food and drink.
Yes. But we know a human being develops on three levels. We develop on our physical or our biological, we develop on our mental, intellectual, and we develop on our spiritual, our moral. So all three of these are enhanced when we talk about fasting, because you're abstaining from the things that distract you from the very things that help you develop yourself. Usually we have overeaten, so we need to stop eating. Usually we've engaged in things that distract our mental capacity. We need to take a time out from that. And usually we're in basically an immoral society that we live in, and that's just a reality. Actually, in an immoral world that we live in today.
So I'm gonna have to interrupt you for just a second, because we're going to have to continue this discussion in the second part of our program. But what I wanted to emphasize is that when we are breaking the fast for Eid al-Fitr, you can't fast during the days of the Eid.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You are prohibited from fasting during the days of the Eid. So, for example, if you have to make up days, you have to wait past the celebration time before you can actually make up your days.
And usually, traditionally, the celebration period is anywhere from 2 to 3 days.
Yes.
So it's always good to wait until after that period before you make up your days of fasting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're getting ready to close out. I just wanted to make sure the Eid will be in the first full week of August. All of the communities are opening up their facilities. Masjid As-Sabur, Masjid, all of the other masajid in the area. So if you are curious, you might want to find out when they're going to be holding their prayers, and come and just join us and enjoy the food and games and celebrations. Because it really is a joyful day for everyone in the community.
Yes, and usually there's always some very interesting conversation that you can take with you.
Oh my goodness. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for having come and listened to our show. If we can close out, we'll show a picture of our new building and invite everyone. This is 4926 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California, Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento. Come and join us. We have iftar every night. We will be having enough food to feed you, so come by and join with us. Our Friday prayers are at 1:30 p.m. year-round. Iftars will be approximately 9:15, 9:30 every night during Ramadan. So please come and join with us. Again, Imam Omar, thank you.
Just wanted to say the first Adhan is at 1 o'clock. And I say that because, I say that because you get there before 1:30, because 1:30 is when the talk begins. And it's kind of bad to walk in the middle of the talk. So try to get there at 1 o'clock if you can.
And turn your cell phone off. We ask for a $5 donation if your cell phone goes off. Again, with the greetings of all of the prophets from Abraham to Muhammad, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.